What's up, party people? This is Bluebox from 1010 Music. Bluebox is a compact 12-track stereo audio mixer and recorder tailored to musicians. For those familiar with 1010 Music's black box sampler sequencer, its influence on Bluebox will be obvious. Bluebox has the same compact desktop format that is highly portable and very convenient. Both devices are catered to a standalone workflow for recording and live performance. But other than the physical characteristic, each device has a completely different function. Let's put black box aside and focus on Bluebox. Before we look too closely at Bluebox, it's important to understand some key concepts about this device. We'll bring up several concepts throughout the video as we walk through various features. Bluebox is a mixer and a recorder. For those familiar with Tascam's portastudio product range, Bluebox is very similar in concept. For those unfamiliar with the portastudio concept, a portastudio or portable recording studio combines a mixing console with a multi-track audio recorder into a relatively compact device. Musicians often use them for recording music without the need for large stereo gear. There have been several variations on this popular theme over the years, especially as technology has evolved. But 1010 Music's Bluebox is one of the most interesting and compact variations on the portable recording studio. It packs a surprising amount of features into this seemingly simple platform. Bluebox is 5.5 inches wide, 5.25 inches deep, and about 2 inches high including the knobs. It has a sturdy metal body and weighs about a pound. It has an elegant and bright 3.5-inch touchscreen display. There are 4 multi-purpose endless encoders, 2 multifunction buttons, and 8 dedicated page buttons. And there are transport buttons for the built-in recorder. We'll look at each of these features in detail, but first let's take a look at Bluebox's connections. On the back panel, we see a USB-B connector to power the device. A power supply and USB cable is included, otherwise you'll need a minimum 2-amp power source to power Bluebox. We have a USB 8 port for connecting MIDI controllers. More on this later. Next, we have 6 1/8-inch TRS stereo line level inputs. You can make these 12 mono inputs if you'd like by using a breakout cable such as this. There's also the ability to route audio inputs per track, which we'll look at shortly. Next, we have 2 stereo 1/8-inch TRS outputs and a dedicated 1/8-inch stereo headphone output. On the front panel, we have a micro SD card slot for storing project files, audio files, as well as updating firmware. An SD card is supplied. We also have 2 1/8-inch connections for MIDI in and out. Included are 2 1/8-inch to 5-pin DIN MIDI adapters, which you'll need to connect to these ports. MIDI is used to sync clock between devices. Let's walk through the various function pages. There are 8 dedicated function buttons so you can quickly access different sections of the device without menu diving. First, we have the mixer page. This is the main overview page of the mixer section. At the top of the screen, we have playhead information. We can see meters for each of the inputs. We see meters for the main stereo output, and we have tabs at the bottom of the screen based on which parameters you wish to control. The encoders are multifunction depending on the settings on the screen. For example, if the volume tab is selected, we see a pink box denoting what is currently selected and what the encoders are controlling. Pressing the A button on the top right assigns the encoders to different parameters. Now, if we select the Record tab, we can arm and disarm tracks by tapping the tracks on the screen. Pressing the B button, we can change the configuration of the project and in turn, the screen layout. Here we can select 4, 6, 8, 10, or 12 tracks in our project. At the bottom of the screen, we can select between single or double rows depending on what we prefer the layout of the tracks and meters to be. This is the first setting we'll want to adjust when we start a new project. Pressing B again toggles us back to the main mixer page. If we press the mixer button again, we see additional settings per track. We have a pan, 2 effect sends, a Q level, and output 2 level. More on these in a moment. Pressing the track button displays the track page. Here we still get an overview of the tracks and meters at the top of the screen, but the bottom half of the screen shows settings for the currently selected track, which is pink. Tapping a track at the top of the screen brings up settings for that track. The pink box shows us which parameters the encoders are assigned to, and we can switch those by pressing the A button. To walk through those, we have the track's volume, pan, input gain, and record arming. In the next box, we have effect sends for the 2 built-in effects. We have Q level, which goes to the headphones, while out 2 goes to output 2. We also have mute and solo per track. Now, when we press the B button, we see input routing for the currently selected track. We can select any mono channel or stereo pair from the 6 inputs. This means you could have 12 tracks that are being fed from only one input, if you wanted. Also on this screen, if we tap the track name above the input section, we can rename the track. Pressing the main button gets us to the main output level adjustments. We still get a half screen showing us our tracks as well as the main output meter. At the bottom of the screen, we see 3 boxes for each of the 3 outputs. On the left, we have Q, which is the headphone output. In the middle, we have output 2, and on the right, we have the main output. The encoders are used to adjust the output levels. By pressing B, we see a list of advanced settings that we can adjust. We also see settings for a compressor. Bluebox has an onboard compressor which is applied to the main output. And if we scroll down, we can see several settings for the compressor, giving us advanced controls of it. Next, let's press the EQ button. We have a 4-node EQ per track as well as an EQ for the main output. Let's select one of the tracks and adjust its EQ. Pressing the EQ button again enlarges the EQ. Pressing the A button toggles between the 4 nodes. Let's adjust the low end. The 4 encoders adjust 4 settings per node. To engage the EQ, we need to select a node type, which we do with the lower right encoder. Let's select L shelf. Let's drop the gain a bit using the upper left encoder. Now let's adjust the Q or resonance with the lower left encoder. Finally, we can dial in the frequency of the node using the upper right encoder. We can repeat this process for each of the 4 nodes to really refine our sound. And we can apply an EQ to each of the tracks as well as the main output to dial in our mix. Pressing the Effects button gets us to the Effects page. Bluebox has 2 onboard effects, a delay and a reverb. When it comes to the effects, there's a few concepts to know. The 2 effects are global to Bluebox. Like a traditional mixer, you can send the track signal to each effect via the track's effect send. Each of the tracks has 2 effect sends, one for each global effect. We'll see how this works in a moment. Pressing the Effects button cycles through the 4 different pages to adjust parameters of the effects. On the first page, we have the delay settings. In order to apply the effects to the track, we need to use the effect sends, so let's do that. Pressing the track button gets us to the track page and we can see the effect sends for the track below. Effect 1 is delay and effect 2 is reverb. We can touch that area of the screen and drag our finger to adjust this parameter. Or we can use the assigned encoder. The more we increase the setting, the more the effect is applied to the signal. Now let's press effects and return to the delay settings. We see a few settings for the delay that we can adjust. We have a filter that we can adjust, and there is a beat sync that is informed by the tempo of the project. Pressing effects again gets us to the first page of reverb settings. Let's quickly return to the track page and increase the effects send to the reverb so we can hear it. Now we can return to the effects page and adjust some parameters for the reverb. When we press the effects button again, we can see more settings for the reverb effect. Again, we can adjust these settings to taste. Pressing the effects button again gets us to the 4th page where we get an XY input control for each effect. This is similar to how a chord chaos pad works, and we can adjust parameters for each effect by simply moving our finger on the corresponding box on the screen. This is great to have for live performances. Pressing the Edit button gets us to the Project Edit screen where we can see and adjust the stems of the project. Here's another concept to know about Bluebox. Like most multi-track recorders, Bluebox creates a recording per track called a stem. Each time you record an ARM track, it creates a new take for that track, which is saved as an individual WAV file within the project's folder on the SD card. We'll look at this more when we look at recording on the Bluebox. Within the Edit screen, we have access to each track's stems and takes. We can then select which take we want to use as the primary stem for that track. Let's say we have several takes of a track. We can see which one is the active stem on the column on the right. We can use any of the encoders to scroll through the list. And pressing the A button makes the highlighted take the active one. Pressing File brings up a menu for additional features. We can add a WAV file from the SD card into a track. Pressing Remove allows us to remove the currently selected take from the project. We can also rename takes to help us stay organized. Pro tip, you can name your stems to create notes about its source and also which takes you like the most. This will especially help you when you go to transfer your files to your computer and when using stems in a DAW. Lastly, under File, we can delete waves from the SD card. Also on the page, we see a Learn button. This allows us to MIDI map parameters to an external controller for quick access. Pro tip, using a MIDI controller greatly expands the interface and workflow of Bluebox. Let's see how this works. We have a Korg Nano Control 2 controller which pairs well with Bluebox. The concept is we'll map each track's volume, mute, solo, and record arm buttons to the corresponding control group on the controller. Let's connect a USB cable from the controller to the USB-A port on Bluebox. The device will power on and now it's ready to MIDI map. On the edit screen, we press the Learn button. When it's lit, we are in MIDI Learn mode. Let's press Main, select the Volume tab, and press Track 1 on the screen. A light blue box will appear letting us know that this parameter is ready to be mapped. Now we move the volume fader on the controller and we see a MIDI CC number on the screen which confirms we have mapped this parameter. By selecting the Solo tab, selecting a track, and then pressing the Solo button on the controller, we have mapped this track's solo button. We'll repeat this for the record arm setting for this track as well as the mute button. And we can repeat these steps for each of the tracks on Bluebox. When we're finished MIDI mapping, we return to the edit page and deselect Learn. We can now go to the main screen and test our controller's mapping. Note, you may need to set your controller's button to toggle instead of momentary. Some devices, like the Nano Control 2, are set to momentary by default. You'll need to change this in the manufacturer's editor software to work properly with Bluebox. Another note, MIDI map settings are saved within the project file. Each project can have a unique set of MIDI mappings. Now our controller is MIDI mapped and ready to use. On the project page, we see a list of the projects saved on the SD card. We can create a new project or rename a project in the File menu. We can also save our current project on this page, and we can select a project to load. Another concept to know is that Bluebox stores all settings we discussed in a project file along with any WAV files that were recorded. These get saved onto a self-contained folder on the SD card. Back on the project page, if we press the B button, we see a tempo for our project as well as metronome settings. We can use the encoders to change these settings. Lastly, we have a Tools page. Here we can set the screen's brightness level. We can see the available storage of the SD card. We can also see what firmware version Bluebox is running. Alright, now let's walk through some of the recording features of Bluebox. To record a track, we need to arm it for recording. We can arm a track from two different pages. Press Main and then select the Record tab. We can then arm a track by selecting it and we should see a red box around it to let us know it's armed. And we can arm multiple tracks if we want. Another place to arm a track is on the track page. Press Track and select the track you want to arm, then tap the Record section on the screen. We should see a red box on the track and the Record button should also be red. The transport buttons at the bottom of the unit are used to record and play back projects. To record, press and hold Record and then press Play. Recording will start immediately. When we are finished, we can press Record, which will stop recording but continue playback. We can also press Stop to stop recording and playback. Note, we won't hear playback of our recording until we disarm the track. Let's press Track and tap the Record button on the screen to disarm it. Likewise, if we have a controller connected, we can simply press the Record Arm button. A concept to remember is that Bluebox has a non-destructive recorder. A new take is created each time we record that track and the previous takes are all saved within the project folder. In other words, it won't record over the last recording you made. Instead, it creates a new take and makes it active. And as we saw in the edit screen, we can select which take is active. A few more things to know about the recorder. Bluebox records in 24-bit at 48K directly onto the SD card. It has 24-bit A to D and D to A's. It comes with an 8GB micro SD card, but you will likely want to invest in a higher capacity and faster card. Okay, final thoughts. Bluebox is a highly compact 12-track mixer and recorder. With its delay, reverb, and compressor built in, as well as having a 4-band EQ per track, there's enough power within this device to mix and record several instruments and make some interesting arrangements. With a mic pre and a DI, you can record vocals, drums, and string instruments. The ability to recall mixes and recordings per project is very convenient. As far as recording features, there is room for improvement, such as adding pre-roll, looping, and multi-channel WAV files. And it would be great to be able to use the device as an audio interface. Hopefully, we will see these features added in future firmware updates. For those interested in a DAW-less recording setup or a live performance centerpiece to connect several devices, Bluebox is worth checking out. If you're interested in Bluebox, check out the link below. It helps this channel but costs you nothing extra. Alright, party's over. Thanks for watching.